Okay, I'll let you introduce it.
Okay, so this I think kind of started, and now it's all over the headlines. But basically, it's the season 5 premiere of The Real, which comes on around 11 o'clock Eastern time, basically had co-hosts Tamara Mowry and Jeannie Mai debating what I guess has been like a very long-held public debate about the sexualities of Bert and Ernie on Sesame Street, which I did not realize was a thing, but I guess it is a thing, and they were on opposite sides of it. Mowry basically was talking from a point of having children and kind of who she wants to be the teacher about homosexuality to her children, and she believed Sesame Street was not the teacher she wanted them to be. And Jeannie was on the other end of the conversation, kind of saying, Sesame Street, she learned English, I guess, from watching Sesame Street, and she just believes that kids can't comprehend that conversation, even if it is going on, and that if it is, then so what? Then, like, why not? It's about education, educational TV. It isn't just about the ABCs. So I guess now this is everywhere. And NPR, so there was actually an interview with the writer, Mark Saltzman, who said on the record that he always intended them to showcase a loving, committed relationship, same-sex relationship. And he was in a relationship with another man at the time. So this served as a creative inspiration for him. And I had no idea this was going on.
So you're telling me that because Bert and Ernie never slept in the same bed. So if he's mimicking this off his relationship, so y'all were sleeping in separate beds? Is that your ideology of a relationship?
I don't know. Do you think that this is appropriate for
Ricardo? They definitely slept in the same bed.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
It opened up to them being in the same bed all the time.
You sure?
So they were in the same bed, I guess, all the time.
Yeah.
But it didn't look like a bed. I know what they're talking about. But it didn't look like a bed to me, or maybe it did, but it didn't seem like they were clothed. It's not like they were ever naked, so maybe in my mind.
They slept in pajamas. I mean,
But yeah, I guess they were in the same bed the whole
time. This is clearly Ludacris Day on the Leadership Blend. This is Ludacris Day. This is okay. Let me say this.
Okay.
I think where this stems from is the fact that a couple of years ago, Sesame Street introduced, I think, a HIV positive or either a Muppet that was affected by a HIV positive, either a family member or either they were introduced as HIV positive. Now, the question always becomes, is it Sesame Street's job to educate your child? I guess that's one of the questions. Now, in my history, Sesame Street was a very big advocate for education, educating, people. So with Jeannie saying that she learned English from Sesame Street, that is not uncommon because one of the actual humans that is on there, I think Maria, that was one of her biggest things. She always loved to definitely go over the alphabets, and then they started throwing in Spanish so that your child could learn how to do both. So over the years, Sesame Street has become a teacher to kids. I will agree with that. Mm-hmm. Now we're in a decade, in a time, in an age where we're having to have conversations, and let's be honest, that we never really wanted to have. And one of those major conversations is about sexuality and how fluid sexuality is. So now we got to decide, how are we going to have those conversations? Who is expected to have those conversations? When are you going to have those conversations? And where are you going to have those conversations? Now, when it comes to Bert and Ernie, I am not a fan of I don't want to say tainting, but I will say tainting images and concepts that have been around for decades. If you're going to have this conversation, then I think you need to create two separate characters and let it be known that this is what this is what they're dealing with, much like they did with this particular character. I'm going to have to look it up really quickly. But this particular character, who I think was actually HIV positive and was introduced to the show. So if that's the route we're going to go, I don't think that you should be touching Bert and Ernie. I think you have to create two characters who are introduced to Sesame Street that come in saying, we're a homosexual couple and this is what it is. But if you're going to introduce it, then you're going to have to understand what you're introducing and how you're introducing it. Because that's always been the legacy of Sesame Street. They don't just kind of throw in Muppets and say, hey, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. They introduce those characters, those Muppets have a storyline, and that storyline unfolds, much like in any writing. But I guess another question for me is, we're already doing this kind of stuff. You can have Steven Universe, which is kind of overtly in its images of lesbianism. Have you seen Steven Universe?
No, I haven't.
You are fired.
I have not seen Steven's Universe. No. But I don't think a lot of girls like Steven's Universe. That kind of falls into the Dexter's Laboratory, All Real Monsters family. It's like for people who like that kind of stuff.
What family is that?
It's like a weird, future Comic-Con. No offense.
I'm offended. So You can tell from my face I'm
No
offended.
offense, but there's a lot of lesbian characters that I always picked up on growing up. Like I always had that gaydar that would go off, like with Eliza Thornberry. I always saw that with her. I saw it with Pepper Ann, who's like a stud, basically. Like, come on. Like, if you Google her, you'll see that. Helga Pataki on Hey Arnold, as much as she liked Arnold, she had some very lesbian
that was
tendencies.
very suspect. I didn't get that.
I think she was overcompensating 100%. And there's even Disney characters that I think are definitely slight gay.
First of all, I'm surprised you didn't name the main one.
Who?
Peppermint Patty.
Okay.
Everybody knew. I mean, you walk around with another girl that calls you sir. like, she walks around and calls you sir.
See, but it's like I feel like there's not always the agenda people think there is, and like parents are always like even the conversation around transgender bathrooms, it always comes back to these parents who are just like, this is how I want my kid to learn about this. But it's like in life, don't we always learn about things when they're introduced like in a normal life circumstance? Like I don't think there's but so much order you can control with when your kid's going to find out what gay isn't and gay isn't. So I don't think people should be upset about this. And Saltzman, the writer, actually did say he didn't have an agenda behind it. He saw no reason not to include them. It made sense to him. So I don't think he has to be a political activist to do something.